Welcome to Tangential Soup, a weekly podcast discussing life in Australia, technology, food, fitness, and the like, hosted by myself, David Caddy, Melburnian, independent developer and tea enthusiast, as well as my good childhood friend Alexander Carr, Sydney-sider, slave to the man, karate practitioner, and lover of adventure. This week, we talk about the launch of the Tesla Model S, Jeff Bezos temporarily eclipsing Bill Gates, the legs of the Tour de France, a podcast Post-Mortem, the demise of Microsoft Paint, and Emoji Inconsistencies. Following up from last week's episode, I thought that I would just mention that the Carrigan's Castle house from the classic Australian film The Castle has sold at auction for $40,000, which was well above the reserve of $8,000. So I wonder what you thought about that, Alex.
Well, look, I did have some thoughts on it. Most of those thoughts just revolved around why anyone would actually bother paying money to this for this particular house, which is, as our listeners will be able to see in the photos that are accompanying the article that will be in the show notes. It's not a very nice house. It's just fairly plain and old and Australian. If you've ever watched the movie, I think you'll see the same.
Yeah, it's a fairly standard weatherboard house.
Mm-hmm.
But its value comes from being in such an iconic film.
Well, I understand that. Yes.
It's like any piece of film and TV memorabilia. Some of those props sell for ridiculous sums of money.
Oh, look, I understand they do, and I understand they mean something to some people. For me, it would just never mean anything because I just couldn't see past the fact that it's just a crappy house, in my opinion.
Especially when it's going to cost the people about $70,000 to actually move the thing.
Yes, that's the thing, isn't it? They've paid $40,000 for it, and then they're going to have to pay another $70,000 to move it, and however much to, I suppose, get it back into good condition. Because I understand that one of the reasons it was being sold was the previous occupants had trashed it a bit.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. But I'm still glad that it hasn't been demolished and someone's bought it, and hopefully it will be preserved for the indefinite future.
Yeah, and look, don't get me wrong, I do understand the value of these things, but yeah, for me it's just it would never be worth it.
No. What would you buy from a film that would be worth it? Anything?
And that's a very good question, actually.
Shrek ears?
No, not Shrek ears, no. So it's something with a practical use to me. And I mean, obviously, a house has a practical use. But...
Like a car or something?
A car?
Batmobile?
Yeah, yeah, in a way. I wouldn't want to drive a Batmobile around myself. Perhaps a sword for use in a post-apocalyptic zombie world. Should that ever come about?
That wasn't a practical item that sprang to mind.
No, it probably wasn't. But yeah, that's one thing that maybe I would do. Something that might look good around the house. Like an iconic painting from a movie or something like that.
Mm.
So something that I would see practical use in. That I would also think looks good.
Okay. Something out of Aliens? Or Alien?
Perhaps. Yes.
Face hugger in a jar?
Definitely not, no. I don't think it would match my decor.
No.
Something a little more classical.
Okay. Nice piano or something.
Oh, yeah, a nice piano. Yes. Something along those lines. A nice chair. A Game of Thrones chair. There you go.
Oh, yeah. A nice throne.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'd probably have to replace my bed with the throne, but, when you're a king...
You may need a bigger house.
Exactly, yes. So, there you go. There's my not very satisfactory answer to that question.
And in addition to the sale of the central house from the Castle film, I also saw an article recently saying that there is the holiday house from the Castle, the one in Bonnie Doon, that's available to rent on B&B if you want to take a nice little trip up there.
So my question is, would you do it, David? Is that something that you would be interested in doing?
I mean, for the pure serenity, maybe. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. This one it's clearly taking advantage of the connection with the film. The owner who's renting it out has like put all different things in there that are associated with the film. There's some nice jousting sticks in one of the windows there, which I know won't mean anything to you, Alex, because you haven't seen it recently. But that's a very classic line from the film that they see. Jousting sticks for sale in the trading post. And they want a certain amount of money for him, and they say, "I'll tell him his dream." And
okay, I do know that particular line from the film. Actually, I'm aware of that.
And take it straight to the pool room.
Not aware of that line. No.
Well, there's a bunch of classic lines in the film, but yeah, in terms of taking a holiday here, probably not. I mean, Bonnie Doon's a nice spot, but there's not too much going for it, I suppose. But hey, for people that love the film even more than I do, which there are many, I'd say this is quite a novel experience to maybe spend a night or two in that house. So why not?
Okay, all right.
I know it doesn't appeal to you at all, but I'm sure there would be other locations you'd be interested in seeing, maybe? Hogwarts, perhaps?
Oh, look, certainly Hogwarts. Yeah, without a doubt. Which I believe Hogwarts, the feast scenes were shot in the Great Hall of Oxford, was it, or Cambridge?
That sounds right. I'm not as much as a Potterhead as you are.
Well, I wouldn't really consider myself that much of a Potterhead. I mean, obviously, I've read the stories.
Or as a pothead.
That's a different thing.
Another piece of follow-up is that of the Ataribox. A few more details have been revealed. This is the upcoming new console from Atari, a classic vendor of games and consoles. And it will be crowdfunded. And it will support a mix of classic and current gaming content. I mean, that's very vague, but that's all they've said at this point. So it makes me think that this could be great, but the fact that it's crowdfunded has sort of taken a lot of the enthusiasm away from the people that were interested in this initially. And also following on from some of the things that you asked last time, in terms of how well is Atari doing and how big they are now, I've come to understand that I didn't really know before that the Atari brand has actually been sold like 3 or 4 times since its height back in the 80s sometime. So yeah, they're pretty much owned by this French company now, so it's really not the Atari of yesteryear. But still, they do own all the IP and everything, so it doesn't necessarily mean this is going to be a bad product, but since I've come to understand a lot more about it, I'm a bit more skeptical that this is going to turn into anything particularly interesting.
I suppose it's natural that these things will happen, but it is a bit sad that it may never achieve anything beyond what it has already achieved, depending on how well this console goes. Because I'd say it would really just have to flop, and that would be it for Atari.
Well, the brand will still probably kick around, and there's a lot of the games that are like available for mobile platforms. If you want to sort of play them, not as well as they used to play, of course, because for a lot of those games you need a proper controller to really appreciate the twitch mechanics. But,
yes.
They're still around, and I think even if this flops and Atari doesn't do anything in the future, it's still going to be a loved brand for a long time to come. So, would be a sad way to end, but, yeah.
I understand that. And yeah, I fully agree it would be. But maybe that's the way a lot of these things go, unfortunately.
Yes. Still got Nintendo, I suppose.
Well, that's true, yeah. And if you don't have a strong direction for a company to go in, you can't sit there and float forever based on not a whole lot of production. They're not really putting in anything new, obviously apart from this, which will hopefully lead to new things.
So the Tesla Model 3 has now been officially launched, and they had a bit of an introduction to it that I sent you a YouTube clip that's sort of a cut-down version of their presentation.
Yes.
Of course, if you want to get the car, you really have to go on a wait list now, and you won't get it till the end of 2018. But the first cars are coming off the production line now, and they're getting into owners' hands. So that's exciting, because this is a really quite advanced electric car from Tesla, starting at $35,000, which is really, I think, in the reach of a lot of people.
Yeah, it's actually incredibly cheap.
Mm.
Considering the technology it has and considering how cheap it should be to run. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and not that it would be a straight conversion rate, but right now with the Australian dollar where it sits against the greenback, that would be about $43,000 Australian dollars.
Which is very reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, there's many brand new cars you can go out today that far exceed that.
Yeah.
Sort of in that middle echelon.
Which was what I think he was aiming for, wasn't it? He wants to get them cheap and he wants to get them high numbers of them out and about.
Well, if you want to buy a Model S, which you can actually sort of order now and get within like 2 months, and you can get a version here in Australia, that's about $120-something thousand Australian. So it's a fair price differential that he managed to bring down from that first. I mean, that was always targeted as being a high-end car because he felt that was the best way to go forward at that early point in Tesla's history because of how much all the components cost and in what volumes he was going to be able to sell them at.
Yeah.
But now to bring this Model 3 out, it's drastically lower in price. And yeah, there's some niceties stripped out. It's probably actually not as good a car as the Model S, but it's still a damn good car for $35,000. He's done well.
Look, I think he's doing very well. And I've always said I love how he pushes things and how he's always looking to advance with his businesses. I think it's fantastic. He in the presentation as well. It's nice to see him talk in the way he's not obviously a hugely natural presenter, even though he does do his presentations very well. He comes across as being quite friendly and nice to talk to, nice to listen to.
He does, doesn't he? I mean, I know he's trying to sell his product and pitch his product, but he doesn't seem to, at least in his presentations, have quite the charisma of some of these bigger tech sort of leaders. But it does come across as maybe a bit more genuine. Yes. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it does certainly come across as that.
Yes, yeah. I think, well, it may be easy to fake. It's nice to at least believe that he isn't.
Well, I think he is passionate about the products that he's aiming to put out into the market.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, no, I think he is.
Especially Tesla. I think this has been like something that he's been working towards for a long time to get a really solid electric car out onto the market for a reasonable price. Not an easy thing to do.
Look, it's not an easy thing to do.
And in volume, because this thing, he wants to start, his initial goal is 5,000 a week on the production line, and then ramping up to 10,000 a week.
Yep.
I mean, that's not really up there with the huge car companies, but it's quite sizable.
Oh, definitely. It's enough, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, not really enough considering the wait times are stretching out probably into 2019 pretty soon, but it's as good as you can do at the moment, it seems like.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that once Tesla becomes a bit more established, that wait time will cut down. Certainly within 5 years or so.
It also interests me that he's selling the Model 3 as one of the safest cars, if not the safest car in the world. And he put it head-to-head with a video comparison from a crash test against the Volvo S60, which apparently could be argued as the most safe car in the world right now. 5-star safety rating. And it did seem like it performed, that is, the Model 3, a lot better than this Volvo S60 in that particular test. Whether it is safest across the board, I don't know, but it seems to be what he was saying. And that's really interesting to me, because I actually had no idea that Tesla, outside of the sort of autopilot, autonomous sort of smart technology for detecting crashes and things like we talked about last time, I didn't know they were going for that much of a safety angle on the Model 3.
Yes, I did notice that as well. And the video they showed was the car being hit from the side.
Yes.
By a post. given all the glass, it doesn't necessarily look like it would be a particularly safe design, does it? But
No.
yeah, I mean, if it does perform how he says, that is very impressive.
And it's good to, even if it doesn't perform quite as well as that overall, it is good to know that Tesla is actually a very safety-focused company.
Oh, completely. Yeah, I mean, especially because it could be a very big car manufacturer in the future.
Yes.
If its electric cars really get off the ground like it wants them to. I did also see that he's designing a truck as well. That Tesla are designing a truck, which will be made for long distance trips, and it will be an electric truck as well, without all the gear changes and everything. So it'll be a one gear, or I guess a 1-speed truck.
Okay.
That runs on an electric motor.
I feel like I might have seen that, but a while ago.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's still in the making, and they only have prototypes at the moment. But,
okay.
And when it's released, it will be released to be driven by humans initially, and then once they can get their self-driving systems up and running, then it will be moving on to a self-driving system.
Self-driving trucks are a bit of a scary proposition. Maybe. I don't know, they seem scarier to me than cars, but probably better in the long run considering how much truckies have to drive in such short periods of time.
Well, yes, but they're also scary from another sense, because if you have self-driving trucks, it will just put an entire workforce out of work, won't it?
Well, that is also true. Yeah.
I mean, how many truck drivers would America have? I'd say quite a lot.
Hundreds of thousands?
Exactly.
If not in the millions.
What do you do with that workforce once they don't have a job because they've been replaced?
Yeah, I guess the same could be said for taxi drivers and Uber drivers if the self-driving sort of taxis come online.
Well, that's actually a very good point. Although, if you think about it, it would probably still be cheaper to run an existing, human-driven truck that you have than it would be to buy a new electric truck.
Well, yeah, at least initially. This change is not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, so there might be some time for the industry to adjust.
Mm.
But then, you still lose those jobs permanently. There's no kind of going back on that.
You're still right, and even if it's a gradual process, with that amount of people, it's going to be a hard thing to transition them.
Well, exactly, yeah. Just another thing to think about, I guess.
Yes, the only people that are going to have a job in the ultimate future is people that maintain the systems.
That could be you, David.
Could be.
It's probably not going to be me, though.
I guess someone still has to balance the books.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. You need humans to audit the machines to make sure everything is running correctly. But,
and if humans are still running around, insurance has definitely got to still be a thing.
Well, yes. I mean, ideally, I would like to see insurance not be a thing for different reasons, though. If everything, like insurance, was looked after by the public system, but unfortunately I don't really think that particular thing is going to happen.
No, I think that's...
anytime soon or ever, maybe.
Yeah, unfortunately. I don't know if that'll ever come online.
Which is just the way it is, I suppose.
At least not in a capitalist society.
No. It's a very good point.
So did you see that Jeff Bezos briefly eclipsed Bill Gates as the richest man on the planet?
I did see that, yeah, with Amazon moving into a lot of new markets. The share price jumped and then it dropped.
Yes.
So,
hence the briefly. Bill Gates is now back on top, but for a very short time there, Jeff Bezos, that's of course the CEO of Amazon, was the richest man.
I actually didn't know that he was the CEO of Amazon and also the major shareholder, I presume.
Yeah. I mean, he has a lot of fingers in a lot of pies.
Yeah.
Did you know Bezos owns a newspaper?
I didn't know.
So Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, and he bought it a couple of years ago when print media was kind of dying, and it still is. So that's interesting. And this is, of course, not Amazon buying the Washington Post. This is Jeff Bezos personally buying the Washington Post.
Which is a very interesting decision because, as you said, it is very much dying, and even I think online news sites are struggling as well.
Yeah, they are. They're all trying to have more of an online presence, all these traditional print media outlets.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are even doing okay, I think. The New York Times is actually getting a decent amount of subscription revenue from online.
Mm-hmm.
But most of them, while in terms of readership, they seem to actually be somewhat balancing their portfolio. You just can't get the advertising money online. It's like maybe 10% of what you can for an actual print ad. So they're really struggling.
Wow, that's actually incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's why so many of them are letting go of top quality journalists and photographers and really slimming down the whole operation.
Yes.
And of course, in Australia, that's such a large country, most of the regional outlets have gone away or have been cut to the bone, which is unfortunate because you don't get local news anymore. You get sort of generic news from the bigger cities.
Yes, I suppose you do.
With the very occasional story here and there when they can be bothered to send out a reporter.
Yeah, which kind of filter through.
Yeah.
Well, I think as you know, I'm quite critical of mainstream news providers because I don't think that certainly most of the papers don't seem to me to provide very good quality news. Insofar as it's not, it seems to mostly be bias, and it's based around creating readership or just sucking readers into the particular news story without actually giving a good account of what's happened.
That's true, but in the current circumstance, maybe you can understand why that is. They're desperate for readers.
Oh, they are, yes. And I don't know how to get around that problem, obviously. And I'm sure they have a lot of people working on it who also don't know how to get around that problem. But yeah, I think creating pretty dramatized news stories and creating biased articles isn't the way to go, in my opinion.
No, it's unfortunate. I wonder what will happen in the future, whether these big mainstream outlets will continue to have a reasonably important role in society, or whether they'll sort of fade away into obscurity. And it'll just be sort of social gathered news.
It seems that socially gathered news is the way it's going, isn't it? Because you get a lot of rubbish on Facebook that gets shared around, and then that's what sends, or that's what a lot of the time sets public opinion. Just being viewed through these particular outlets like Facebook and YouTube and whatever. So yeah, that seems likely to me.
Could well be.
Which isn't the way to go either, obviously, because that's also biased. But
it is.
How do you get around that?
Facebook and Google and all these companies are trying really hard to develop algorithms that can detect both fake news and also heavily biased news and try to filter it out. I have no idea how successful they're going to be, but that is something they're attempting to do.
Okay. Sounds like a fairly worthy cause to me.
A
lot of the time it is very hard to tell the difference between what is real and what is not.
Yes.
And often it's not even that you're being told lies, it's just a lie of omission when you're only presented with certain facts to help shape your opinion on a certain subject.
Yeah, one half of the story.
Yeah, exactly.
So the Tour de France recently wrapped up.
Are you aware of who the winner was?
Well, of course it was the mighty Chris Froome.
Naturally. I admit I haven't been following the Tour de France at all this year. I don't even know who was in the competition, so that doesn't mean a whole lot to me, I'm afraid.
But do you know who won the green jersey, the sprinter's jersey?
I don't know who won the sprinter's jersey, no.
It was Australia's very own Michael Matthews.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I like to hear about Aussies winning, as do most Australians, I think.
For Team Sunweb.
Oh my gosh. Well done to him.
Yeah. I was surprised. I was only actually looking up the results right now. I thought Chris Froome had won. And I know Matthews won at least a stage. But I didn't know that he finished overall winner of the sprinter's jersey.
How does one win the sprinter's jersey? I'm not actually sure how that works.
It's sort of like a point system. So if you cross the line first, you get however many points. And then if you cross the line second, you get however many points. So the points accumulate over the entire race. And if you finish with the most amount of points, then you win overall.
Right, okay.
So he may have only won that one sprint, or that one finish. I'm not sure. But he must have done very well in most legs to get that.
Okay.
finishing up near the front. And of course, Froome being someone going for the overall championship doesn't really worry about crossing the line first, as long as he's sort of near the front.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I know that if you're going for the overall win, that's exactly what you do. So you'll let your sprinter go ahead, kind of carry you through, but you'll just try and push through after them.
Yeah, you kind of just want to stay out of the way of the people sprinting for the finish, because there's so many crashes that happen at that stage.
Yes. I wasn't aware that Froome had actually won 4 Tour de France titles.
Yeah, crazy, huh?
That's insane.
Quite the legacy he's building.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Hopefully he won't go the same way as Armstrong and turn out to be a cheater.
Yes. Well, we can hope.
I was actually quite convinced that Armstrong wasn't cheating, because it just seemed so ridiculous that these things kept coming up, but nobody could actually prove anything.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? It really has tarnished what was, at the time, such a magnificent effort.
Yes, it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
and my understanding is that most athletes during that time were actually cheating in some way. It's just most of them were unable to be found.
That's probably true. I don't know why professional cycling was so rife with it, and hopefully it has been cut down drastically now. But yeah, at the height of it, it did seem like just about everyone was doing it.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous because, I mean, my understanding is even a lot of professional athletes today will do drugs in their off season. So when they're not actually actively competing in the sport and they're not under conditions where they have to be tested, they'll be on things like steroids to get their performance up. And then once they're off them and their system's clean, then they can go back into active competition in their active season.
Mm.
And I mean, obviously you can't do that with all sports, but my understanding, especially some Olympic athletes, they'll be training like that, and nobody can prove it.
Yeah, I don't know why you would necessarily risk it, but I guess they're just pushing their body to the limits.
Well, I think a lot of them might feel that they won't be able to perform at that level without a little bit of extra to get them along.
Yeah, very much detracts from the purity of the sport there.
Look, it does, yeah. And I mean, it would almost be just as easy to say, look, everyone can do drugs. There you go, you all have a level playing field now. And then, there wouldn't be such a thing as a drug cheat. So you couldn't have that unlevel playing field by introducing drugs into it.
In some ways that would be better, but I guess for people's safety, they don't want to do that. Some people just can't regulate themselves.
Yes, yeah, and I suppose it depends on which particular drugs you're talking about. But I know obviously they can all be quite dangerous to your health. But then again, so can training to be an athlete. Because I mean, you are pushing your body quite a lot, and you can do quite a lot of damage to yourself under those conditions.
Yes, which flows into the link that you sent me with the images of the French cyclists' legs.
Yes, although that's not necessarily damage to your body. It's just your body adjusting to being put under those conditions. So I don't believe that he's in any particular danger from that. He just has a lot of blood flowing through his legs. When you look at the picture, you can see his veins all standing out in them in quite a horrifying fashion, actually.
Well, I'm no expert, but I feel like if you did this, maybe not one time, but sort of over the course of your career many times, I don't know how that could actually be good for you. I feel like it would have some sort of toll on your extremities there.
Well, it's an interesting question.
But yeah, it does look horrific. But I'm sure it's not actually that bad.
Well, no, maybe not. Because, I mean, really what they're doing is their bodies are just adjusting to having a lot more blood flowing to and from their legs to oxygenate their muscles and give them better performance. So, I mean, perhaps it is the case that it is harmful, but I could see how it couldn't be.
Still, it was good for him to post that on Instagram.
It was, and from the article that was accompanying that picture,
that we'll have in the show notes,
published on ABC News by James Mastor. The article suggests that they the backlash from showing people their legs. Cyclists have often faced quite sustained accusations of doping, because this would obviously be an effect of taking performance-enhancing drugs, where you have your body reacting like this, and you show a lot of veins, and you just generally look a bit crazy. But I mean, obviously, doing something like doping would just get you to a place where you are performing at a very high level a bit quicker. It's not necessarily going to change your body in ways that your body can't actually change itself naturally. It just makes the work in between those two steps a lot easier. So, I mean, while it's possible that these people are doping, I don't think that those photos indicate whether they are or not in any real way.
No, I can also just believe that after cycling for hours a day for 16 days straight, that's what your legs would look like.
Yes, I think so.
So recently, a fellow podcaster who ran the Indie Cider podcast, which you may or may not have heard of, recently decided to call it quits on that particular podcast after failing to gain too much traction. And they put up quite an interesting post dissecting its performance up on Reddit. And yeah, I think both Alex and I found this quite interesting, both what the things that they did well, the things that didn't go quite so well, the things that they think they might do better if they were going to approach it again, and just the numbers of listeners that they managed to obtain in the 3 years, and all that sort of thing.
Well, look, absolutely, it was very interesting. I mean, one thing that kind of struck me was, I think he says in this particular article that his best rated, or his most listened to episode only got about 700 downloads.
Yeah.
Now, I believe his where he kind of launched this from was, he has a YouTube channel where he unboxes and plays video games. Now, I haven't actually seen his YouTube channel, but it has about 70,000 subscribers, I believe. And it just seems interesting that from this, he was only able to gain about 700 downloads for his particular podcast. Now, I don't think he really talks about what he did for advertising, but it seems like he could have got a bit more out of it than he did. And, he has a whole list of things that he says he wishes he'd done better. But one of the things he says is he didn't have a co-host, or a regular co-host, with which he could kind of build rapport and energy. So that's one thing we did, right?
Yeah, his was more of a interview-style show where every week he'd bring on a new indie developer and discuss their particular game with them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I read a couple of things that he thought that he could do better. I'm like, oh yeah, we're doing that. So definitely gives you some confidence.
Yeah, I think it does.
And especially the numbers that he talks about. I mean, we're not quite there, but we're getting there, and we're certainly much further advanced after probably 3 months than he, probably was after 3 months.
I guess maybe he just didn't fully target the market that he had available to listen to these particular episodes. Because it seems to me like one of the things he said was he had this pre-existing audience with his 70,000 subscribers for his particular videos, but they didn't really directly translate across to indie games, because he just did more unboxing and I suppose playing what I suppose would be more mainstream games.
Yeah, you are right, though, that at 70,000 subscribers on YouTube, it's interesting that he couldn't get more of that audience to come across. I know, like you say, it's not directly related, but it is still vaguely related. And I would have thought there'd be some more overlap in that 70,000 that would find both things interesting. But clearly not.
No, which I couldn't explain personally, but obviously it's just the way he approached it, and perhaps he just assumed that things would happen that didn't happen, which is obviously not something you can do. You have to make the things happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but look, it does actually give me a fair bit of confidence to see where he kind of went, and I don't know. It would be interesting to know where other podders sit with their podcasts, because I think a lot of people would perhaps just do a podcast for themselves. They might have hopes that it will go somewhere, but they don't necessarily do anything to push it anywhere.
No, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of the equivalent to a blog or a vlog in a lot of the
Yes.
cases. And so in that case, yeah, it's really just for the individual more than the potential audience, and they're really not doing it for any sort of commercial return.
Which is a very valid reason to do something, though, I think.
Absolutely. But in this case, it seems like he probably wanted to turn it into a bit more of a business, because he has multiple podcasts by the sounds of it. And this was probably one of the weaker performing ones.
Yes, yeah.
That required the most work.
Yes. Funny about that, isn't it?
So Microsoft Paint is going away, Alex. I don't know how you feel about this. If you've ever used Microsoft Paint.
Oh, of course I've used Microsoft. I think most people have used Microsoft Paint.
Most people have used Microsoft Paint. Me mainly being a Mac user, not so much, but even I have used it on occasions to do a quick thing here or there. And yeah, they're getting rid of it in the next update for Windows 10. So, yeah, end of life.
Well, I mean, I guess based on the functionality that it has, and I believe there's Microsoft Paint 3D.
Yes.
Is their new move with that. So it makes sense that that at some point they had to move on from that. But yeah, it's a bit sad because I mean, obviously, during my childhood, sometimes I used to have to stay at school at school. When I say at school, I used to have to stay at school because my mum worked at my primary school, and I used to have to stay behind sometimes to wait for her to finish work. And I would sit on a computer in the back of the office and draw things on Paint. I was never very talented with it, but that was part of my childhood. And I must admit, David, there have been times in my adult working life, working for my current company, where I have not known what to do. So I've pasted a picture into Paint and then written on it and then taken that picture back out of Paint.
As like a sort of bit of a markup process.
Yes, exactly.
Putting arrows and little notes on things, yeah.
Yes, so that is, that's happened.
Not the ideal tool for it, certainly, but it gets the job done, and so that is one of the many reasons why this is a bit unfortunate, because I don't think it would have taken them much to keep updating it. And for quick things like that, especially when you're on like a new computer, or you happen to be on someone else's computer for some reason, you know that you always have Paint to do a job like you were describing just then, that if you don't know what else is available to you in that particular moment, it's handy. But, yeah.
Hopefully Paint 3D will be able to replace it.
I sent you a video, Alex, that will be in the show notes, about how emoji appear on different platforms and how there's some inconsistencies among the different platforms. In this particular video, it highlighted what appears on Microsoft's platforms versus Apple's versus Google's Android versus Samsung's flavor of Android.
Yes, and it was very funny as well.
I found it quite entertaining, yeah.
So my main thing that I got from the video, or the main point of the video, is that just because you see a particular image when you send an emoji, which I've been tripped up on, it's not necessarily the image that the person you're sending it to is going to see if they're on a different platform to the one you're on. That's
right, because each of them have their own emoji sets. They're all drawn for the different platforms. There's different artists involved that create each individual picture for each individual platform.
Yes, and they all look quite different. They all convey different meanings. Or not all of them, but a lot of them convey different meanings.
Well, yeah, they're all working to the same emoji specification, but usually it's sort of like a one word or a very short sentence about what it's trying to convey. And within that, there is some realm for artistic license, and sometimes they don't always seem to align.
Some of the examples that I liked were the square, which I think on an Apple is a square, but then it just completely loses its meaning across the other platforms. And I think on Microsoft it wasn't even a square; it was a rectangle with rounded edges.
Yes. And not only that, I think that one specifically, it says that it's meant to be a black square, and on Microsoft it's green for some reason.
Yes, which is an interesting way to interpret that one.
Yes.
And The ghost is actually another one that I've experienced, because the ghost on Android just looks like a kind of ghost that's wandering around haunting things, but on Apple it looks like it's giving you a hug. So
friendly ghost.
Yeah, exactly, friendly ghost. It could be sent as a hug emoji, and I know Samantha sends it as a hug emoji, but for me it just looks like a ghost, so it really loses its meaning when it comes across to me.
Yeah. I like the handgun is a ray gun, little laser gun on Microsoft's platform.
Yes.
I know they did that sort of to make a bit of a stand against violence and things, so in a way it makes sense, but it completely changes the meaning.
Yes, which really defeats the point of it, doesn't it?
Exactly, because at the end of the day, as much as some people hate it, these really are a tool for communication and getting your point across.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
And a good tool, I think, in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Speeds up things sometimes.
Yeah,
Shorthand. And a way of conveying emotion too is quite handy.
Yes, it is. Yeah. An efficient way of communicating.
Thanks again for joining me, Alex.
Not a problem, David. Pleasure as always.
You can follow and get in touch with us on Twitter at Tangential Soup, and you can find this week's show notes for more information about today's topics at tsp.fm/16. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider sharing it with someone else you think might also. And we'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
Ciao.
So Alex, I see you've been doing incredibly well in Clash Royale. So well, in fact, you've left my clan, the poor old bovines, and moved on to some fancy clan that has just expert people in it.
Not entirely. Actually, it's funny you say that, because I was doing quite well in Clash Royale, and I did leave the bovines. Although actually there was a migration from the bovines across to a Reddit based clan, because the bovines weren't really donating enough, and we didn't have enough members to consistently fill donations. So we did move across to this Reddit based clan. But since we've had probably 2 updates, and both of them have really nerfed my deck, so made my deck perform a lot worse in just the general games than it used to.
Oh, okay.
Which is a bit of a sad situation. So basically, I actually haven't played a game in a few days now, and I don't know if I have the energy to go back to it.
Oh, okay.
I do enjoy the game, but yeah, it's just not something I can be bothered doing at the moment, especially because I'm playing a fair bit of Pokemon Go with Samantha. Like, if I'm around her, I'll play Pokemon Go.
Yes, that's back in vogue a bit with the new updates.
Yeah, a tiny bit.
It was the 1-year anniversary of Pokemon Go, so that's why they've been hyping it up a bit more. And I've seen a few news stories about it.
Yes, yeah, with the introduction of new legendary Pokemons as well. So yeah, it's a fun game to play. I quite enjoy it, but it's good that it's got that active component to it, I think, as well, because you're not actually just going to sit there and play Pokemon Go and not do anything. If you want to play Pokemon Go, you actually have to get out and do things. And it's been quite interesting going around Sydney, seeing going to the legendary raid battles and just seeing the people that turn up. Because at any given instant in the Sydney CBD, which is of course quite densely populated, you'll have 20, 25 people just clustered around a random point in the city, all sitting there tapping on their phones, fighting a legendary boss at a gym.
What are these battle things, and how do you know where they're happening?
So they're I don't know if it's an official map or an unofficial map, but you can get an unofficial map off Pokemon Go Maps, I think is the website, PokemonGoMaps.com. And basically what you do is you can just filter it by the type of Pokemon you're trying to catch, and in this case mostly we've been just looking for legendary Pokemon. The 2 out at the moment are Articuno and Lugia. And you just filter it by that. You see where the location is, and then you go up to it. And once you're within, I think, 10 meters of that particular location, you can then select it on the Pokemon Go map, and then actually battle that Pokemon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's quite fun. The app itself is so buggy though; it crashes all the time.
They still haven't fixed it properly. Because I know it was pretty bad at launch, but after a year, I would have thought they would have, done some work on polishing it.
No, like regularly crashes.